Hey guys, Josh here, and this is my review of Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life. Developed and published by Marvelous, or its subsidiary Exceed in North America, this is a remake of Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, which was first released about 20 years ago for the Nintendo GameCube. It was then re-released as Another Wonderful Life, where you played as a girl, and lastly, there was the special edition for the PlayStation 2 with a few added features. This remake aims to combine the best of those three versions of A Wonderful Life, a farming simulation game with a focus on the passage of time and raising a family. I've been playing for over 100 hours with the Japanese version of the game, which was released on January 26, 2023 for the Nintendo Switch, and the worldwide release for Steam, Switch, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S is planned for June 27th. In this video, I'll let you know how my experience with this game has been so far, what I like and dislike about it, and hopefully it should give you a good idea of whether or not this game is for you. Let's start, and if you've played the original game, you will notice a fantastic addition right away, and it's that you can now create your character. You can pick between 5 different skin colors, multiple hairstyles, a few eye and hair colors, and 2 different outfits. Everything is available no matter the gender you pick, and later on you will be able to unlock a few more outfits. There are not as many options as in the last game, Pioneers of Olive Town, but if we consider that this is a remake of a game that didn't offer any of those things originally, it's definitely an improvement that I can appreciate. Once your character is created, you're then shown around your inherited farm by Takakura, who was a close friend of your father. As usual with Story of Seasons, the story is pretty simple. You take over an old farm and create a life for yourself in a little community, but this time the story is divided into 6 chapters, each lasting for 1 year. After each chapter, a few years will pass and some villagers will age, others won't for some mysterious reason, and new events will occur along with new things to buy and discover. It's always fun to explore at the beginning of each chapter to see how the different characters have changed and if there's anything new, but honestly, I wish there were a bit more changes from 1 year to the next. For example, a ton of things happen in the valley at the beginning of the second chapter, like a new family moving in, but in the following years, changes feel very small in comparison. These changes are the same as in the original game, so it is a pretty faithful remake. However, I would have loved to see more villagers moving in or out, maybe getting into relationships with each other, and so on past the second year, as I think the idea was not used to its full potential. Even though there could have been more changes, the cast of unique characters living in the Forgotten Valley does manage to keep things interesting. There's Daryl, the scientist who's always working on some weird experiments, Gary and Nina, the cutest elderly couple in the series, and Pui, a cuter version of Murray who dreams of going to Coco Island. Everyone has something special about them. Some might say the characters could be a little bit one-sided or stereotypical, but I find that it makes them more charming and memorable. The events and cutscenes with those characters, a lot of which are brand new, will get you attached to them as you progress through the game. However, I have to say that the daily dialogues can be very repetitive. For example, Chris has been telling me nothing else but how to make ice cream for the last 3 or 4 years now, and most characters really don't have many more lines than in the original game. You will be spending a lot of time with your family, who plays a big role in A Wonderful Life and its story. For this reason, you will have to get married at the end of the first year, and I usually prefer to wait a few years before getting married in farming games, but this time, the story is a bit more linear and follows a strict progression in chapters. That being said, getting married is not too difficult, and in the eventuality that you fail to propose by the end of the first year, you will be given the option to choose among the characters who like you the most. There are 4 girls and 4 guys to choose from, with most of the guys having received significant redesigns to make them look more conventionally appealing, as they were not originally designed to be marriage candidates. This remake also includes the addition of same-sex marriage, and no matter who you decide to romance, you will get to raise a child and see them grow into adulthood. This game is unique in the series because it allows you to actually influence the future of your child, who will end up on one of 6 different paths, such as farmer, artist, or musician, among many others. And depending on factors, like if you bring your child into certain places, introduce them to certain villagers, or show them certain items, their interests and skills will evolve as a result, and everything can be tracked in a convenient menu, so you can keep an eye on their future, which will influence the ending of the game. There's also a ton of new events with your family. For example, you can now see your child playing with Takakura, or you can spend some precious time together at the beach. These events are honestly so adorable, and I'm so glad they were added. They just make me want to have a child in real life, and that is something not all games can achieve. Overall, in terms of story and characters, I think that A Wonderful Life is one of the best in the series. It's not perfect. For example, I think there could have been more variety in the daily conversations, But the events are interesting, the cast of characters is unique, and you will get attached to your family, helping you get immersed into the game. Speaking of immersion, with A Wonderful Life, the series returns to a third-person view instead of a top-down one, which we haven't seen in a long time. This is my favorite angle for a farming game as it allows you to really enjoy the beauty of your surroundings. The Forgotten Valley is a bit small. There is a farm where you buy seeds, a cafe, an inn, and a few houses. For shopping, most things will have to be ordered from Takakura, or you will have to wait for a van to set up his stall once every 5 days. I wish the valley was a little bit bigger or that there was a little bit more to explore, but on the other hand, it really manages to create a rural vibe even more so than in other games. Even though the valley is very small, every corner of it looks good, my favorite one being the forest where the goddess pond is. When you arrive, the mood suddenly changes, it gets a bit darker and foggy, there are magical flower lamps lighting the way, you're surrounded by flowers and trees, and it just feels so relaxing. Not only does it look great, but some little details were added for your convenience. For example, you can now cross the river from the forest to the archaeological site instead of having to go all the way down to the bridge every single time. Overall, you probably noticed that this remake looks a lot more colorful than the original game, and the change in art style might not please everyone, but I think it's the best looking 3D Story of Seasons games we've had so far, and I sincerely enjoy the atmosphere it creates. I especially love how the changes between the seasons are gradual. Not everything is all green on the last day of summer and then all of a sudden orange on the first day of autumn. Instead, the color of grass, the leaves in the trees, and the weather effects will change gradually as days go. Just like in real life, weather can also be unpredictable, and one year you might have rain in winter, the next one you might get your first snowfall in autumn, and it might seem like a small thing, but it just makes the game feel a lot more organic. It's fun to see how the year evolves day by day and just enjoy the scenery by taking a walk or fishing, all while listening to the sounds of nature. In fact, sound effects are one of the biggest contributors to the atmosphere of this game. There's not that much music compared to most farming games. You will unlock different records to play on your farm with various tracks you will recognize from older games, but once you're outside of your farm, it's just ambient sounds. Birds, bugs, a flowing river, the waves of the ocean, or even the weird electric sounds from Daryl's lab, and the lovely piano notes around the mansion when Lumina is practicing. All of these things really do a great job of setting the mood for what A Wonderful Life is, a relaxing and slow-paced farming sim. Days are long, and even though seasons are just 10 days long, you will have plenty of time to just relax and enjoy your beautiful life in the valley. Now, let's start talking about the gameplay. Farming is, of course, one of the main activities you will be doing, and if you've played the original game, you might remember how much of a pain it was. The animations were slow and tedious, you could only plant seeds one at a time, and the different versions of the tools, like heavy or light, were a bit confusing, and the tools that were actually supposed to cover more than one tile at a time, like the watering can you got from Romana, did not even work as intended, so you still had to water every single crop individually, even with the best watering can. Fortunately, you can now plant seeds as well as fertilizer in a 3x3 square. Animations are super quick, and everything feels a lot smoother. But what makes the farming that much better is how tools in the remake were streamlined, and now a lot more in line with the rest of the series, where you upgrade them to copper, silver, and gold, by using them a certain number of times and then purchasing the upgrades from Van. There is also an additional upgrade that is locked behind befriending the different characters, which encourages the player to interact with everyone daily. With every upgrade, tools become more efficient and cover a wider area, but even without the upgrades, farming just feels way better. Some will probably wonder if there are sprinklers, and there are not. But watering is so quick and the fields are relatively small, so it's not a problem even in summer when you have to water twice a day. However, later on, you can purchase machines that will spread fertilizer automatically, and that will increase the quality of your crops so you can make more money when selling them. To make even more money, you can also grow hybrids, one very unique feature of A Wonderful Life. By feeding seeds to Vinny, this giant three-headed plant, you can create dozens of different combinations, from things that look just like tomatoes of different colors, all the way to things that look like light bulbs and musical instruments. Many crops will only grow in certain seasons or in fields of a certain quality, but you can also combine seeds with wild flowers to modify these attributes, allowing, for example, for a crop to be grown all year round or to increase their base quality. I really like how unique this whole system is, and I feel like when I played the original, I did not take advantage of it, maybe because I was too young to understand, but also because farming was just so tedious, and now the whole experience has been vastly improved. However, I feel like it could still have been done a little bit better. For example, every single hybrid has to be created one by one by talking to Vinny and selecting each seed in your inventory over and over again, and even though you can skip the little cutscene of Vinny creating the seed, it sometimes takes forever, especially if you're trying to create enough seeds to fill your fields. I guess this was done this way because every time you combine seeds, the results can be different. So sometimes you will get a regular seed back, and other times you will get a proper hybrid, but I think they probably could have still made combining seeds in bulk work if they tweaked things a little bit. I really do enjoy the hybrid mechanics and seeing those special crops grow, but I just dread the process whenever I have to sit down for hours to create them. You do unlock a seed maker later on, which facilitates making seeds, but it still remains a lot of work. And this is in contrast to everything else in terms of controls and UI, as overall it's been improved a lot. You can cook multiple dishes at once, recipes get added to a list as you learn so you don't have to remember them yourself. You can also sell more than one item at a time, you have a bell to bring your chickens in and out instantly, and so much more. The menus were also improved. For example, you can now see stats like your hunger and stamina, which makes them a lot easier to manage. You also have tabs for your relationships and animals, and other things you couldn't see before. You can save at any time, you can read Takakura's notes, which are kind of tutorials telling you about the different game mechanics, and there is also an encyclopedia by your bed, which you will love if you're a completionist, as it lists all of the items and things you've collected. The controls are also much better. First of all, you can remap all of the buttons, which is still pretty rare for a console game, and definitely good in terms of accessibility. Another thing I really like is that all of your tools fit in one toolbar, so you won't have to remove tools in and out of your bar, and you can also switch between the toolbar that is just for your tools and your 5 other bars for regular items by pressing L and then selecting up or down with the D-pad, making it really easy to access any of your items. The inventory is smaller than in the original game, but it's more than large enough where space is never really an issue, especially since you have a lot of storage available on your farm. These new controls really make for a pleasant farming experience, and one of the biggest upgrades of this remake. The game as a whole also performs very well on the Switch, and I have not experienced any noticeable frame rate drops or technical issues during my playthrough, so if you're not sure what platform to get it for, I can tell you that the Switch version is great. But one thing that is maybe not as great or as much as an upgrade as the controls is the livestock. The game does a few interesting things that make animals a bit different from the rest of the series. For example, cows need to be fed twice a day, and they also produce milk twice a day, with the amount of milk varying with the seasons, which I think is a pretty interesting mechanic. If you've played previous Story of Seasons games, you might think that milking cows twice a day would be time consuming, but since days are longer in this game, the animations are pretty fast and the milk is picked up automatically, it does not feel tedious at all. Animals are pretty easy to take care of and won't take too much time out of your day, as you can leave them outside and they will automatically eat the grass in your pasture, which will grow simply by throwing some fertilizer on the ground. Petting and talking to your animals daily will increase their affection, leading to higher quality products. And on the other hand, if you neglect them by leaving them outside while it rains, for example, their health will decrease and so will the value of their products. However, the health of your animals decreases so slowly that it won't have much of a noticeable effect, even if you don't bring them back in or if you forget to feed them, and trying to feed them inside is a pain as they keep walking over the food troughs, preventing you to place the food, which wasn't an issue in the original game. But my biggest complaint is one I've been having with all of the latest entries in the Story of Seasons series, and it's that the animals actually can't get sick, so if you stop taking care of them, yes, the quality of their products will eventually decrease, but there will be no long-term consequence. Since a big part of this game is about cherishing life with your family and friends, and because it deals with topics like death in its story, I find a bit odd the contrast with the immortal animals, and even though they all look very cute, they do not feel as alive or unique as they could have been. Seeing my animals pass away in the original game was truly heartbreaking, but it also taught me about the fragility of life and made me want to care more for them. Another thing that I would consider to be a downgrade with the animals is that breeding animals became almost useless. Maybe the aim was to simplify the gameplay, but in the original game, you needed to breed a cow in order for her to start giving milk, and she would do so for about a year, after which she would have to give birth again in order to continue producing, and I found that to be a very unique mechanic. To make a cow pregnant, you could either pay for a bull of another farm to do it, or raise a bull on your farm, which was more costly upfront, but usually beneficial in the long term. You can still do the same thing in the remake, but cows now actually produce milk forever no matter what, so there's not much reason to get them pregnant over and over again, and it does make them produce a bit more milk for a limited period of time after giving birth, but considering that they can't produce milk for most of their pregnancy, I don't think it's really worth it, except for completing the encyclopedia. Also, in previous games like the Friends of Mineral Town remake or Pioneers of Olive Town, each generation would produce better milk, but it's not the case here, so a store-bought cow is often the easiest solution and there's really not that much benefit in breeding your own cows. On the other hand, other things were improved. For example, you can now have more than one goat and you won't be stuck with a goat that stops producing milk forever after a year. I would say that I have a bit of mixed feelings about how animals are handled in this game, especially compared to the original, but I guess everything is now more in line with recent entries, so if you are new to the series, it most likely won't bother you too much, but if you prefer the way animals worked in the original, you might feel a bit disappointed. Either way, the quality of life improvements are definitely enjoyable. I did not talk about the pets, so you can teach some tricks to your dogs, however, I still have not figured out if it serves any purpose. You can't interact too much with the cat except for picking it up, so I wish there were a bit more interactions and functions for the pets. And of course, there's also a horse, so this one is actually very useful for getting around the valley, and you can choose between 3 different colors. So when you're done taking care of your livestock and watering your crops, you will probably want to spend some time with the villagers. I mentioned earlier how the characters in this game were interesting, but befriending them is also important in order to progress. Almost every character will reward you in one way or another as you get closer to them, for example by giving you new outfits, music records, or even the goddess tool upgrades, which will make your life a lot easier. This encourages you to take the time to talk with everyone daily and give them gifts. Most characters will accept more than one gift a day, you simply have to find out what they like and dislike and your friendship will go up at a pretty good pace. You will also be bonding with everyone during the festivals, if we can really call them that. There's the New Year, Fireworks, Harvest, and Starry Night festivals, so one per season. They're mostly just consisting of dialogues, but for some of them you will have to bring a product from your farm or some kind of meal. My main complaint is that they're pretty much the same every single year, except that the characters look a bit older. Some, like the Starry Night Festival, will vary slightly. For example, the first year you will be by yourself and you'll have to make a wish, maybe for money or for love, while in future years you will be with your spouse and you'll have the option to wish for things like better relationships with your family or for your child to lean towards a certain profession, and those wishes will actually have a small impact, which I enjoy. For the most part, however, the festivals are pretty much the same year after year and there isn't much incentive to go back. I wish they would have added some series staples like horse races or animal contests, or a more involved harvest festival where your crops are actually judged based on their quality. Since the game is built around a set amount of years, it could have been interesting to have the festivals change more from one year to the other with changing rewards as well. But even though the festivals are not the most engaging, A Wonderful Life still offers the players a few minigames to enjoy. You need to talk to the right person at the right time to trigger them. They're fun for a little bit, but also a bit easy, and the rewards, ranging from fish to stone, are a bit underwhelming. They are a fun way to keep yourself busy or to spice up your daily routine, but nothing you would spend too much time on. Slightly more interesting activities include fishing and digging. The fishing is very simple. You cast your fishing rod, and when a fish bites, you press A repeatedly a few times. You can fish in a few areas like the river, the ponds, or the ocean, and you can also upgrade your fishing rod in order to catch different species of fish. Fishing is not the best way of making money, but it makes great gifts for many villagers, and it is useful in cooking. It's relaxing, you don't have to think too much about it, and you can simply enjoy the scenery and the sounds of nature around you. Another activity is digging, so there are no mines in this game, but instead there is this archaeological site which you can go to on most days between 10 and 5 in order to dig up some fossils and artifacts. The floor gets bigger every year if you find some special tablet, but there's always just one floor, and the goal is simply to dig the little squares and find items that are mostly useful for gifting villagers. It definitely feels a bit underwhelming compared to mining in the other games, and it's not as rewarding, but it's also not something you absolutely have to do unless you want to complete the encyclopedia and get everything. Luckily, if you're not too much into the digging, this remake does include a few new things to do, such as photography. You now have a camera, which I think is a great addition, and it's fun to take pictures as a way to record how the seasons and characters gradually evolve. One problem, however, is that you can only save up to 25 photos in your in-game album, so I wish the photos would also get added to the Switch's album like in Animal Crossing New Horizons, as the limit does feel a bit restrictive, and there are lots of times when I wanted to take photos but also didn't want to delete my older ones. Of course, you could open up your album and take screenshots with your Switch, but it's not the same as if they were saved with their full resolution in your Switch's album. It would have also been interesting to have the camera play a little bit more of an integral part in the gameplay, for example, like in Pioneers of Aleftown, where you had to take pictures of the different wild animals to fill up the museum, and that is not the case here, but it's still a nice thing that you can do just for fun. Lastly, you can do requests for villagers, which will appear twice a month on the bulletin board. They will ask you to bring them things like specific dishes, some crops, fish, or other items, and will reward you with items of a similar value, like some seeds. From time to time, you will also find unique requests where you'll get things like an alarm clock to decide at what time you'll be waking up, or items that will trigger special events. Requests are a good incentive to try and collect different items, cook new recipes, and you will need to do a lot of them in order to collect the 88 Wonderfuls, which are this game's version of achievements. I really like those along with the encyclopedia as they make it easy to track your progress, and it's fun trying to complete everything. And if you're worried about the story ending after 6 years or the seasons only being 10 days long, don't worry, you will most likely manage to finish everything by the end, and even if you don't complete everything within 6 years, you can actually keep playing after the story ends. This game is very relaxing and slow-paced. It never feels like you have to rush, which makes it different from some of the other games, such as Pioneers of Aleftown. In fact, by the end of the 4th year, and even more so in the last 2 years, besides just growing a few hybrids that I missed and making sure I cooked all of the different dishes, I did not have anything to do during the day, so I would just go to bed very early every day and almost just sleep through the game. There are still a few more things to do in the Unlock than in the original game. It does feel a bit faster, but I really wish those last few years would be slightly busier. To conclude, Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life is a great remake filled with quality of life improvements that make it difficult to go back to the original game once you've played it. Despite some things that I would consider to be downgrades, like simplified animals, I think this is the best way to experience the Forgotten Valley and its unique characters, and if you liked the original, you'll most likely love this improved version. As it is a remake, and even though a few things were added, don't expect a ton of new features or as many things to do as in a recent game like Pioneers of Aleftown, but if you're looking for a laid-back, extremely relaxing farming sim, in which you can just raise a family in the countryside, you will enjoy it. I think the atmosphere is the strongest point of this game, and it's just so cozy. If you're still undecided between this and the other Story of Seasons games that were released in recent years, all of them available for the Nintendo Switch, I do have a video comparing all of them, so that might help you to make a decision. Feel free to check that out, and let me know if you've played this remake or the original A Wonderful Life. What are your thoughts on this game? Leave a like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.